Oh, hello. Thanks for looking in. And welcome to my home, as Dame Edna Everage might say, but more flamboyantly. You've actually caught me in the kitchen being filmed, but don't worry, it's all very proper, nothing rude. It's for my Bloodaxe book, Baldwin's Catholic Geese. Poems that look at life through the lens of both obscure and well-known musical performers from the 1800s to today. Some comic, some tragic, some both. And some are more personal too, like, well, isn't it lovely when you bump into somebody that you haven't seen for a long time? Providing you like them, of course. Double act. Amanda, Keith, our hug spanned 18 years since that night at the Rocky Horror Show with Nicholas Parsons, Queen of Compares in suspenders, your borrowed PVC so tight it split, and me, hidebound by leather trousers, shrunk the size of lederhosen in the wash. Was love suppressed by laughter? Take the incident in that Italian after La Cage aux Folles, our second date, when you mistook a storeroom for the loo and couldn't find the light until you'd wet yourself. And when you told me, I did too. Only a pair of theatre trips, then we were parted. Just for fun, let's make it 3. Nicholas Parsons, mentioned in the poem, hosts the long-running radio show Just a Minute, and he has got great legs. Now, I live in Halifax, Yorkshire, and the last time I read this next sonnet, a local historian in the audience, you know the type, never knowingly interesting, well, he booed it. It's about a guy called William Paul, who was born in 1820. He was stinking rich, William, but he had absolutely nothing to do. He needed a hobby. Bad impresario. William Paul, with millions to waste on battling boredom, wondered which place in Blighty had the least discerning taste. Could he unearth a town where utter tripe would be considered culture at its height? Silk purses, not sow's ears, night after night. 24 hardened scouts were sent to scour the land. 400 flops auditioned for his troupe. The 10 most woeful went on tour, including long-abandoned novelties like Lady Clockeye, Baldwin's Catholic Geese, The Human Mop, Frank and his dancing teeth. From Cumbria to Cornwall, no one asked them back, except the Palace, Halifax. I've no idea what Baldwin's Catholic Geese used to do, and Lady Clockeye, mentioned in the poem, requested that she be buried on the site of the Palace, Halifax, but she isn't. Have you heard of the saying, if you want a good job doing, do it yourself? The problem is, an actor-manager, J.D. Plummer, born 1846, took this way too far. Accept no imitations. Do your colleagues call you a control freak? Fuck 'em. Abandoned on the first night by his cast, J.D. played every character himself. Dick Turpin, Victims, Innkeeper and Black-Eyed Daughter Bess, Dick's worn-out horse, also called Bess, and Black, this did cause confusion, Tom the ostler who betrayed them, Weeping Widow Shelley, Tyburn Hangman, and it ran for 15 months through Glossop, Leeds and York, till he collapsed banging 2 coconuts together at a gallop, then went bankrupt, then insane. Worth it though, to show incompetence what can be done by one who stands, delivers, falls, alone. Actually, in the asylum, JD became notorious for criticising the other inmates' basket work. Anyway, forget him. Joan Rhodes was born in 1921. She was an incredible woman who had a dreadful childhood. She was stick-thin, but possessed genuine, folks, superhuman strength, in more ways than one. This is for Joan, coming on strong. 3, and in the workhouse. 10 when you ran, missing till 20, then as lean as luck in fishnets at the fair. You tore a phone book up, bent iron bars, broke nails, took 4 men on at tug of war and won, which led to lifting Bob Hope, while Marlena Dietrich loved a woman tough enough to keep refusing King Farouk, who wanted you to wreck his best 4-poster bed, with him still in it. Joan, I've seen your photograph, fab in a basque and tan, that cast iron bath held high, before you disappeared again, found in a care home, where, I understand, greeting the manager, you broke his hand. Joan lived to a ripe old age, unusual for many music hall artistes. Kate Cheval, for instance, died aged 15. Her act was, well, did you ever play that game at school where you'd throw yourselves upon some unfortunate kid who'd fallen over? For Kate, out from under. They couldn't crush this girl who knew her place was at the bottom of a heap of men, the biggest from the best seats in the house, hand-picked to form a formal queue of 10, 20 milords, esquires, governors, not above making a stately pile on top of Kate. Stepladders helped. A noble effort by this body of substantial weight to take her breath away. They'd orchestrate themselves, a criss-cross hierarchy, and after their undignified collapse, which found her flattened but alive, they slapped each other on the back. Bad luck, old boy. Ignoring Kate, of course, who rises now before us, here. Okay, from tragic to Freddie Parrot-Face Davis, who unusually for my characters is still alive today. Freddie began his career in the 1960s as a children's entertainer, and his act basically consisted of him speaking like this. I'm flick, flick, flick up to here. Bless him. I'm still a fan. And this is for Freddie, 11 plus. In retrospect, to wear a bowler hat so low his ears bent double, then displace each S by blowing raspberries, was not Oscar material. But in the days when train impersonators hadn't yet been shunted off, nor muscle men in trunks with organ music, Freddie's speech defect could fill a seaside theatre's summer months. I loved that man. Unaware, my laughter led my best friend's gifted elder sister, who read Bronte, to believe I was backward, until I asked her to go out with me years afterwards. And she didn't say no, just looked appalled before responding, "You!" I actually recently had the honour of performing that poem in front of Freddie at a comedy festival, and he was kind enough to sign my copy. Bloody awful. An equally ridiculous man was the music hall artiste Felicitas Bob Franklin. Beloved, but I'm not sure why. Confidence trick for felicitous Bob. All Bob could do was brag. Songs, handsprings, gags, a basic jig, beyond him. Proper acts, proud to dress difficult as easy, spat his name. But in the gods we couldn't get enough of this enigma, trousers ragged as those hanging from the worst of us. Despite my great success, I won't laud it, he crowed, over you less fortunate. Bollocks, of course. Deep down, we must have known he didn't own a racehorse, let alone Grange over Sands. But his gift was to make us wish he did. And when he said good luck may never come our way, we smiled, he's right, until we hit the street. Then fights broke out. Actually, when asked by a reporter why he was so proud of his lack of talent, Bob replied, "It keeps me in touch with my audience." Hylda Baker, born 1909, had bags of talent, but she had to fight for recognition. In those days, female comedians had an even tougher time than today to get top billing. Hylda was a trailblazer. The late, great Victoria Wood once told me that Hylda Baker paved the way for future funny women. Oh, and Les Dawson said he learnt to gurn by watching Hylda. And Hylda learnt it as a kid working in noisy textile mills. It's how the women communicated above the machinery's racket. This is for Hylda. 9 was the age the likes of her learnt how to lip read at the mill, to flap their silent mouths in turn. But Hylda found her voice inside this act, talent that kept her in pink gins for years, a popular comedienne, bottom of the bill. Funny, then, to be described by Delfont as an overnight success, proprietress of Pledge's Pickle Factory on ITV. They said that show went to her head. Deaf to them, she changed a tipple to a lot of creme de menthe, bought a bungalow in Cleveley's, quilted bedroom floor to ceiling, cocktail bar and opera box, doorbell singing, come back to Sorrento. As she warned reporters, don't be dazzled by the decor, it's contemporary. Barred from playing panto dame, she made her men wear dresses, let them stay on the condition they were dumb. Her harem swelled and neighbours, outraged yet refined, presented a petition. Please leave, thank you. This prompted the flagpole with, you haven't had the pleasure of me yet, flown every day and twice for matinees. Spandex at 70, that bump and grind with Arthur Mullard on top of the pops. And then she died, demented, utterly alone, unmourned by impresarios and sisterhoods alike. 9 was the number at her funeral. Now, I'm hoping even some younger viewers might have heard of George Formby. He was a huge star of the 1930s, 40s, 50s, sang hit songs, made daft but classic films. And in World War II, he was such a courageous entertainer for the troops, putting his life at risk on tour with ENSA, Entertainment's National Services Association, also called Every Night Something Awful. He died in 1961. But George, this is for you. Engagement. Last artiste to leave Dunkirk. First back after D-Day, buck teeth bared against the bullets, flat feet tapping at the double, donkey bray war cry above your banjolele's tin hat rattle. you got rattled too. Outside Berlin, the celebrations show no soldier heard, drowned out by them. Not whistles, cheers, not well behaved, but bellows, frightful, in your face. Calm down, lads. Then the penny dropped. All silly grin and trivia. You were their instrument. They roared their want at you, through you, yelling themselves back from blood and guts to leaning on a lamppost, home. Done roaming. In memoriam, Gerald Bosworth, 1857 to 1919. In boots, long socks with garters, khaki shorts, he'd bellow songs about the great outdoors. And yes, though tubby and by no means tall, the strapping voice and big hat made us all think, here's a giant of a man, for whom those cardboard hills on stage, fake thunder from the wings, buckets of rainfall posed no threat. He laughed at them, we laughed with him. Yet, we alone continued laughing after Baden-Powell asked him to take some Cub Scouts, briskly mind, up Langdale Pike. And Gerald's legs gave way, requiring 4 small boys, first aiders, 1 for each limb, to ferry him, dead silent, down again. I'm told David Croft and Jimmy Perry modelled their Dad's Army character Captain Mannering on Gerald Bosworth. Okay, it's about this time in the show when I usually say something like, oh, you've been a lovely audience, the best we've had all night. But I've no idea, have I? Because you're not here. Anyway, there was a place, closed down now, thank God, where English performers in particular hated appearing. They loathed and dreaded it. That place was the Glasgow Empire. Eric Morecambe was once asked on a quiz show, where did Napoleon die? And he said, the Glasgow Empire. Yes, it was here the gang show audience slow hand-clapped that girl guide with laryngitis. The Beverley sisters flitted on, then promptly darted off again to cries of, Christ, there's 3 of them! Where else would Eartha Kitt be forced back out, Ken Dodd having cut his act in half? After Des O'Connor fainted from derision, dragged to safety, 70 ice creams were counted on his suit. Even when empty, anger occupied this auditorium. It bloomed, silent and black, a storm building to break above row upon row of folded seats, all rigid as a nervous herd before it bolts. Of course, not all performers are on the stage. Here's a memory of somebody from my school days. Caretaker. He had no name, this bucket carrier, curmudgeon, always bending to unblock a drain, bleed radiators, brush up. And the rumour was he'd lost his toes, the lot, in World War II. That's why his walk had so much rock, a toddler's forward progress. Laughable. The type of man we didn't want to turn into, but, knowing our luck, would. And I'd be lying if I said, for me, this changed when, through a tiny pane of smash-proof glass, I watched him in the gym collecting balls and hoops before he nudged, as if by chance, the tape recorder on. To Morning Song by Grieg, he started swaying slightly, out of sync, half off the margin of a mat he hadn't cleared. His arms began to lift, not much, a bashful flap, a reticent romancing of the music. Maybe half a minute passed, with nothing added to the repertoire, until he wiped his eyes and stood, head bowed. I'm still not sure what made me walk away so slowly down the corridor, or how I knew to broadcast what I'd seen would hurt us both. Omnivores still are, artists who ate the inedible on stage. Bombastus Furioso, circa 1820, was a fine example. For Bombastus, roughage. To entertainers during scene changes, Bombastus ate a chest of drawers each night, throughout a run of Where's My Helmet, famous for its 15 acts. This is a sight, a critic said, to more than compensate for wooden acting and a rotten plot. I'm told cabinet makers would compete amongst themselves to build one that could not be splintered into dinner by his teeth. He polished off the lot, followed by a plaque, "Our furniture has Furioso beat." In later life, he fell apart, like flat packs do today, and died in a secure unit, chewing both his arms, red raw. There was a more recent omnivore who ate a whole Cessna light aircraft, but his career never took off, which is a joke that Les Dawson would have delivered far better than me. I wrote a bit for Les, and we became good friends. He was a smashing guy, but our first meeting was far from auspicious. For Les Dawson, the audience. I'd never met someone who was no taller standing up than sitting down. So near the floor and lacking form, your legend could have been the man without a chassis. Little wonder it was hard to find you in the theatre bar, plonked inside a ladies' circle, being treated to your Cosmo small-piece repertoire. Between the smut and shrieks, I introduced myself. "Bloody hell, you're big." "Bloody hell," I shot right back. "You're not." A dozen powdered faces froze. "Mine's a double scotch," you slurred, and turned away. And so did I, thinking, fuck this, but reappeared with a drink you didn't thank me for. "Les, this was not what I'd expected when your agent liked my sketches and said, 'Meet him at the Palace, Manchester.' I'd pictured post-performance bubbly in your dressing room, slaps on the back and 'Genius, here's to a great relationship.' Instead, I'd got a twat, half cut in public before curtain up, who took my bundle like a summons. 'Did Mr. 10% suggest when I've time to plough through this?' Another scotch. "And put it on the tab, you twerp." When I returned, your groupies had all gone to take their seats. You pinched a cigarette and slumped into a grumble about how Bob Monkhouse hated you, landing blankety blank. He coveted that show, still does, the sun-tanned sack of shite. Then softer. "Sorry, son, I'm not myself. The missus." But your punchline was, "She's not got long," and nothing mattered but to hold her hand. Trouble is, I love that girl. Still, where there's life. We almost hugged. Then you had to push off to do your stuff. I hoped you could use mine. You said, from far away, nothing's impossible. After Leslie's first wife died, he spent a very unhappy time, but then met his second wife, Tracy, and they had a baby. So the latter part of his life was lovely, until he died too early in 1993 of a heart attack. It's telling how many comedians do die from heart trouble. Tommy Cooper, Eric Morecambe, Sam Patch, Kenneth Horne, even Molière, lots more. Rosa Richter, born 1862, was the original human cannonball. And I have to say, there's never been anyone since of her calibre. Her stage name was Zazelle, the shooting star. Her manager, the great Farini, was famous for doing handstands blind across Niagara, dying over 90 in his bed. Rosa, 14 years old, had been an acrobat since 5, but soft bones bend unprofitably when they've entertained too long, too soon. His human cannonball offer, to be the first, could slow the fall from Tumbler to the workhouse. Worth a shot. He gave the day job up while Rosa got top billing every maiden flight, until she broke her back, which left her in a steel corset, alone. That's showbiz. All the same, let's have a galaxy in this girl's name. The great Farini, by the way, was rivalled only by Blondin for his daredevil tightrope skills. Joseph Pujol, born in Marseille in 1857, was a much sought after fartiste or flatulist. I kid you not. For Joseph, l'epitomane. From 15 paces, fart a candle out. It isn't funny and it isn't clever. Though Joseph, his anus trained to hoover air then blast it free, would disagree. His heart set on conveying it's an ill wind that blows no French trooper any good. And art, I'd argue, should be felt first in the gut. Anyway, he made a bomb, then opened his own bakery, the sign saying, in French, an empty vessel never makes most noise. Henry II's fool, another flatulist, and French again, fared rather better, with a dukedom and 1/10 of Kent, passed on through all the eldest boys. There are in fact Neolithic stone engravings thought by some to be carved in celebration of ancient flatulists. Sid Field, born 1904, was a fabulous comedian and bullshitter. He could convince you of anything. For Sid, beyond belief. He talked a good trapeze act, in his tights, hands white with chalk, the best we never saw. I might even change my mind mid-air. Sid had us gazing at those dizzy heights, and he was there, all swing and sweep above us. Never mind, he hadn't even climbed the pole, set foot inside a circus, or off terra firma, ever. Were we blind to this pretence, naive to let such elevated promises toss reason to the wind? Or could Sid's flights of fancy catch and turn the truth? Can words, well placed, become so real they are flesh and sinew on the wing, not less than, but beyond the real thing? Sid began as a child performer, and to combat his stage nerves, his mother would give him brandy before every show. By the age of 13, he was heavily dependent upon alcohol, which led to his early death at 46. 3 more blasts from the past for you. And just thanks so much for watching the film. I do hope to meet you in person one day. I'm a big fan of the diminutive singer Charles Aznavour, who died last year at the age of 94. He was a true megastar, quite rightly, I think. For Charles, chanteur. Fed up with feeling optimistic? Put Charles on, whose height, or lack of it, was one of the few things he'd laugh about. That and being named time and again the world's best known Armenian. But what about Tigran Petrosian, he'd ask, aware the entertainment press don't follow chess that avidly. Your loss and mine, his lived-in long-abandoned face would gift us. And this was his gift, to share in melancholy tenor, not despair, but something softer, more finessed, more French. The c'est la vie when post-coital bliss can't sleep us through sterility, divorce. Or worse, lyrics that lovingly rehearse a prostate diagnosis, drunken days. Even a song in celebration of the European Union, rung through his bruised vibrato, sounded so full of sorrow for how hard first love can fall. Edith Piaf lent President de Gaulle her handkerchief. I'm paid per sob, he told Le Figaro. Perhaps his own could be traced back to 20, when he sheltered Jewish families, their lives and his at risk. Listen to She. Hear how bleak happiness can be. There's more than artistry to this. Jean Cocteau once said, before Charles Aznavour, despair was unpopular. Now, if you remember Dick Emery, you'll know that like Matt Lucas on Little Britain and Stanley Baxter, Dick portrayed a plethora of weird and wonderful people, men, women, children. But before them, there was Arthur Ricketts, who died in 1883. He's forgotten now. So I'd like to pay tribute to this pioneer in a sonnet called Soulmates. Arthur created characters, then he, quick change, became them. Dirty bugger Gunter Rummage, missionary Reverend Zeal, little tyke Bob Scrap, Caruso Blubber, Crackpot, Whaler, the unbearable Jack Strutt. I could go on. He did. And off, and on again, 24 times in 15 minutes. But each concentrated cameo contained a rich existence, so fleshed out, complete. On Arthur's deathbed, he inquired about the health of all of them. And some turned up to say farewell. So I suggest it's not dead relatives we reach to touch when our own curtain falls, but everyone we've been. I've read that Arthur had a very lonely childhood in a bleak orphanage cum workhouse, so he made up a host of imaginary friends. And finally, to close the show, I'd like to mention Toby Turner, about whom Tommy Cooper said, if it wasn't for Tubby, there'd be no Tommy. So if you remember Tommy's act, which was a series of magical catastrophes, you'll get an idea of what Tubby did as well. For Toby Turner, that's your lot. Toby Turner's trick was to fail to put a deck chair up, then, in a temper, chuck the bloody thing away. But somehow, through the flap and rattle of its flight, it did what Tubby demonstrably couldn't do, and clattered back on stage, unfolded, fit for sitting in. But Tubby never sat, despite a disappointed public who clamoured for the climax of a seat collapsing underneath the heavyweight. Instead, he'd amble over and pretend he was about to park himself, but then just bow. A big name like him knew, with fare this poor, you've got to leave 'em wanting more. Thank you, and goodbye from me and from all my troopers.
Thank you, bravo, bravo.
Whew!